We're going to paint this door with antique white linseed oil paint as we want it to have a high gloss finish. This is a beautiful paint for joinery and has an extra high gloss finish. Before you begin, make sure that you have everything you need. White primer indoor and antique white indoor linseed oil paint. An empty pot to mix the paint in. A stick for stirring the paint. Shellac. Suitable paintbrushes. Oil filler. Tools for filling. Sanding material for rubbing down. Brush for cleaning. Cloth for wiping the brushes and hands. Soap for washing the brushes and hands. Before you begin, we recommend that you first read the application instructions and tips included in our brochure and on our website. The estimated rate of distribution per coat on untreated wood is 12 to 20 square metres per litre of paint. The drying time of the paint is 2 to 3 days under normal drying conditions. The optimal temperature to apply the paint is approximately 15 to 25 degrees Celsius. Make sure that you have good ventilation in the room you're painting in, especially for drying purposes. The white primer paint contains balsam turpentine, therefore it is advisable to use a paint mask if you're painting large areas indoors. When painting a planed wooden surface, some basic preparation is required if you want a smooth and even result. Any knots must first be treated using shellac to prevent resin from penetrating the painted surface and discolouring it. Shellac can be poured into the practical shellac set to make the work easier. Then apply the shellac on all the knots. It doesn't matter if it's applied outside the area. After approximately 20 minutes, repeat the treatment a second time. Open the can of primer using a putty knife to avoid damaging the lid. An undamaged lid is easy to put on again and will tightly seal the contents. Stir the paint with the stick so that it is thoroughly mixed. When painting a door, you begin with the panels first and then finish with the frame. Avoid dipping the brush too deeply so that you get too much paint on it. The brush we're using is an oval primer brush which makes it easy to access all the different surfaces of the door. If there are any natural imperfections in the wood, it may be necessary to make a few crosswise strokes with the brush and then smooth it out following the grain of the wood. Paint using a criss-cross technique and smooth it out afterwards with a light hand and long brush strokes. Finish off by painting the frame. First the horizontal parts and then the vertical ones. Let the brush remain in raw linseed oil between coats. Once the primer has dried after at least 2 days, it's time to fill in any imperfections with the oil filler. When the filler has dried after approximately 2 days, the entire door is rubbed down. Then brush off the dust. Now we're going to mix the paint for the second coat. Open the can with a putty knife to avoid damaging the lid. Stir the paint thoroughly so that it is homogeneous. Mark a can into 2 equal parts for measuring and pour the primer up to the first line. And then the antique white top coat paint to the top line. Stir it and pour the mixture into a paint pot. Now mix it thoroughly and label the pot so that you know just what there is in the paint store. Always stir the paint before applying it. Apply the paint as before. Begin with the panels and then the frame. Apply the paint using long brush strokes following the grain of the wood. Finish off by smoothing out the paint using a flat brush of high quality. Apply the paint carefully as a glossy surface is very revealing. When using high gloss paint, a smooth, well-painted surface is crucial. Keep the brushes in raw linseed oil until the next coat. When the paint has dried after about 2 days, any small irregularities are removed in order to achieve the highest finish. Remove the excess oil from the brush and wipe it with a cloth. The final coat is applied using undiluted antique white linseed oil paint. Stir the paint before you begin and use the same technique to apply the paint as before. This application is crucial for the final result. Make sure that the paint is applied evenly and well distributed with repeated long brush strokes. Always make sure that the room where you're painting the door is clean to prevent any dust or dirt from spoiling the high gloss finish. It is important that you rinse the cloth in water before throwing it away to prevent spontaneous combustion. Wash the brushes in soap and water. It is a good investment to look after your brushes as a good brush is expensive. A second-hand, well-maintained brush is also better to work with than one that is brand new. If you intend to continue painting in a few days using the same paint, it is not necessary to wash the brushes but just let them remain in raw linseed oil so the paint doesn't dry. This is a classic antique white colour tone that is very suitable for indoor joinery where a very high gloss finish is required.